Good morning. Today we're going to be talking about developmental learning theory. Let's start off by looking at a few aspects of social emotional development. This includes a child's experience, the way they express themselves, the way they manage their emotions, and their relationship skills. As the name would suggest, this includes both intra and interpersonal aspects. So first, let's look at some features of emotional development. Emotional development includes understanding one's own feelings and the feelings of others, managing one's own emotions constructively, regulating one's own behavior, developing empathy for others, and forming and maintaining relationships. Keep these features in mind as we look at Erikson's psychosocial development. Erikson's psychosocial development theory proposes that there are 8 stages, each of which has a crisis that a person faces, and depending on the person's success dealing with this crisis, the effects on the person's development can be either negative or positive. The first stage occurs around age 1, and the crisis is trust versus mistrust. During this stage, a child looks to their parent or caregiver for consistent care. If the child's needs are met, he or she will in the future have hope that when crises arise, someone will be there to help. If, on the other hand, the child's needs are not met, he or she will be fearful or suspicious of people offering to help. Through practicing responsive caregiving, parents can provide this safety and predictability, which is essential for proper early emotional development. A parent and infant participate in an effective or emotional communication system, which allows them to regulate their emotions and interactions. This consistency serves as a foundation for the child's future interactions with adults. The second stage occurs around age 2, and the crisis here is autonomy versus shame. At this stage, a child begins exploring his or her independence. If the child is encouraged to explore his or her limits and develop independence, he or she will develop a strong personal will. If, on the other hand, the child does not receive support in his or her endeavors, the child will become doubtful of his or her abilities and self-worth. By establishing a supportive and social environment, parents can encourage their child to develop a strong sense of self-efficacy and make decisions on his or her own while providing a safety net. Emotional security is related to a child's resilience to failure or emotional discomfort or distress, and their sense of self is where they begin to become aware of their own preferences and characteristics, as well as those of others, and they begin to understand their role as part of a family or community. Parents provide the emotional security required for a child to comfortably develop that sense of self. Interactions with peers, additionally, allow a child to gain social experience. These relationships with peers allow the children the chance to form strong social connections, which we'll see in more detail going into the next stage. Stage 3 occurs over ages 3 to 5, and the crisis here is initiative versus guilt. In this stage, a child begins interacting with peers, displaying even more initiative than in the previous stage, and asking questions. If the child receives support in taking initiative and testing his or her own limits, he or she will develop a sense of purpose. If, conversely, the child is not met with support, if he or she is discouraged from taking the lead, the child will develop a sense of guilt. It's important to note that there should be some guilt so that the child can learn accountability and self-control. By demonstrating caring interactions, parents serve as a role model in their child's development and empathy. Over this stage and the previous one, children are developing empathy, the ability to put oneself in another's shoes or feel what someone else is feeling. A child's disposition or temperament will affect their development of social relationships. So, Displaying positive emotions will allow relationships to form more easily, and conversely, displaying negative ones will lead to difficulty in forming relationships. Emotional regulation plays a large part in this as well, as good emotional regulation results in perception of high social competence by peers. Children also have the opportunity in interacting with peers to practice impulse control. They begin to act according to social norms, and they also inhibit their behavior which might hurt their friends. Children have the opportunity during this stage in interacting with peers, to practice God. All these contribute to a child's growing social understanding, which includes expectations of others, complex social interaction, and application of social skills to specific situations. The next stage occurs between ages 6 to 12, and the crisis here is industry versus inferiority. Here, a child begins to seek approval by demonstrating skills. If the child is supported and encouraged, he or she will gain a feeling of pride or competence. If, on the other hand, the child is not met with support, he or she will feel inferior, unconfident, and may doubt his or her own abilities. It should be noted that similarly to the previous stage, some failure can help a child develop modesty. In the next stage, identity versus role confusion is the crisis. An adolescent begins to learn the rules of society and explore where he or she fits into that society. If the person is able to properly re-examine his or her identity, the person will develop a feeling of fidelity and self-image. Having a strong sense of initiative, as developed in stage 3, helps greatly with this. Failure in this search for identity is likely to result in role confusion or uncertainty, which can lead to rebellion or unhappiness. In the 5th stage, we look at intimacy versus isolation. A young adult begins to explore relationships more intimately, searching for love. If the young adult is able to form meaningful and intimate relationships and make long-term commitments, the result is comfortable relationships and love. If, on the other hand, the adult avoids intimacy, the result can be isolation, loneliness, and possibly even an inability to form meaningful relationships. In the 7th stage, we look at generativity versus stagnation. Adults begin to settle down, develop their families, and look at the bigger picture. If the adult is able to feel as if he or she is giving back to society, he or she will develop a sense of care for others. This feeling of giving back to society can be attained through raising children or otherwise being involved in a community. If the adult is unable to achieve this feeling, he or she will feel stagnant and possibly unproductive. The last stage, stage 8, is the final stage in a person's life. In this stage, the crisis a person faces is integrity versus despair. Adults reminisce and reflect upon their lives. If the adult feels as if he or she has lived a productive and fulfilling life, this will lead to a feeling of integrity and a sense of wisdom. This wisdom lets a person accept their life and accept death without fear. If the adult has many regrets or feels that he or she has lived an unproductive life, the result can be a feeling of despair and dissatisfaction. And with this, we wrap up the end of Erikson's psychosocial stages. Thank you very much for joining us.